Welcome to the Mind of Business Success podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Cramer. Our guest today is Kyle Gabhart. Let's talk about retirement in a
Woohoo!
slightly different way, right? Because
Yeah.
you're shaking things up. So, welcome to the show, Kyle.
Thanks so much, Alicia. I'm excited.
Okay, let's talk about your philosophy on retirement. I think that is the perfect way to kick things off because everybody does have their sort of preconceived idea of what retirement means. And it's not always the most empowering, especially for business owners. You and I chatted just real briefly about this, and it's come up in numerous conversations with other guests as well. It's hard for a true entrepreneur to retire. So I'm gonna hand this over to you, and I want to
Sure.
hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, no, I love that. You're exactly right. Entrepreneurs, by their nature, don't lend themselves well to doing nothing. We're actually pretty bad at it. And furthermore, I would say, I love the fact that you said it's not a very empowering concept. When you take that word retirement, it's interesting when you look at what other things in life we retire. So we retire horses, we retire battleships, we retire jerseys, and all of these represent things that are used up. We can't squeeze any more value out of them. We're done with them. Put it on the shelf, throw it away. And is that really something we want to associate with our lives, with our identity of who we are? Are we really done? Are we really washed up? Are we really ready to be set out to pasture? So none of that's very flattering. None of that's very appealing. And so I think for those reasons, there is this tendency to reject that traditional notion of retirement. And yet, on the flip side, we are exhausted. And we do hope that there's some kind of light at the end of the tunnel and some opportunity for rest. And so we're very much, I think, oftentimes kind of stuck between the reality of we do want some kind of a break, but that classic notion of retirement doesn't sound very appealing.
So what's the solution? Because everybody's asking the question.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I love that. So I think there's a couple of aspects to it. And the first one is that I think it's important to identify early on what really sparks your soul, what really makes you excited about life, the universe, and everything, what I would describe as your legacy. And rather than putting that off as something that we're going to start working on in our golden years, I would encourage people to start thinking critically about it early on and roll up their sleeves and get involved in building that legacy while they're still young, while they're still also building their business or set of businesses, so that they can begin to have a taste for that thing that they're so passionate about, those relationships they care about, those values and ideals that they uphold, and also can start to build that legacy and steer it and steward it long before they get to the point of theoretically handing it off to that next generation.
So we've got a couple of interesting things here. We're talking about legacy, and people have different ideas about what that means. You see people who achieve a certain level of status or wealth or success, and then it sort of turns on, right? This desire to create this legacy, to leave this legacy. And then you have others who have, accomplished and they've reached that place of maybe they're close to retirement. And so now they're looking a little bit more, a big picture, right? What did I actually contribute in this life? Do I feel good about what I've accomplished and what I'm leaving, associated with my name? But now you're bringing this sort of more front and center. Now, how can people begin to even get clear about what their legacy could be if they're not at that level or they're not at that stage in their life?
Yeah, no, I love that question, Alicia. I think the core of it comes down to realizing that legacy is so much more than just the financial aspect. That is what we often attribute it to. And I can appreciate why, right? As a financial planner, I deal with that on a routine basis. And classically, when we think about legacy, we think about people with statues and monuments and libraries in their name. And obviously, there's large dollar signs attached to that. But I would encourage people to think about not just their treasure, but also their time and their talents as key resources that they can be putting to work now in building their legacy, rather than purely thinking in terms of legacy is something I begin to invest in way down the road after I've done all of this blood, sweat, and tears, because there's so many missed opportunities at that point, and you run the risk that you haven't been able to really steer the legacy in a direction that's consistent with your values and your ideals. The last thing I would say about it is I have my own definition for it. And I'd say that legacy is the sum of the life you live and the impact you make on your community and the people around you.
So I love that. And when someone is really being true to themselves, I can only speak to personal experience, right? But this is also understanding how we operate as human beings. When we have that, it creates so much more fulfillment in life. There's so much more meaning in that day to day, because you referenced something almost sort of casually, right? A lot of people, they're hustling, they're grinding, they're working their ass off for some future payday, some future, sitting at the beach, their beach condo in Mexico or whatever, and that's painful to work today without that fulfillment or without that inner satisfaction on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis for something that hopefully I'm going to be able to enjoy.
Correct. No, it's so true. And there's missed opportunities you'll never have back. There's teachable moments that you could have spoken into, and even just events and experiences, whether little league games or whatever it might be. There's so many opportunities to start in practical ways building and developing that legacy, and it doesn't have to be big. So I'll give you a recent example that I've been doing with my family and advising to clients. So there's a charitable mechanism you can use for giving, which is called a donor advised fund, a DAF. And quite simply, it's just a way to earmark money on an annual basis that's going to go to charitable needs. You can invest it, you can decide, I want to distribute this money over the next 5 years, 10 years, 25 years, what have you. And that's great. And you can build a lot of interesting momentum, but I'm doing something very, very simple with it, which is there's the ability to give a slice of your DAF to someone else, and they then choose the 501c3, the public charity that it goes to. And so I've got 6 kiddos. They range from age 15 up to 23. And at Thanksgiving this year, just last week, at least for when we were recording this podcast, I told all of them, hey guys, mom and dad have a DAF. Here's what the heck a DAF is. And you're all going to be receiving an email. And it's going to have a gift that you will have the opportunity to designate where it goes. Between now and Christmas, I want you all to do some research and choose a charity that you want to give that gift to. And then at Christmas, share with everybody, what charity did you choose and why did you choose it? And then that way we start getting them involved early in thinking about giving back and thinking about charitable elements. And that's always been important to us. But previously we would have thought of it in terms of, well, we'll make sure and clarify in the will that when we pass, it's really important that they give back. Well, yeah, but you never taught them how to do that. You never stewarded it and handed off the baton and equipped them to make those kinds of decisions. And you're just hoping that decades later, enough of the things you said over time kind of trickled in and they absorbed enough of it to pull together, I think this is what it looks like for us to steward well what was handed to us. And instead it's like, no. Legacy doesn't have to be this enormous thing that happens way at the end of life. It can be little bitty things that you do all along the way to coach that next generation on what it looks like to finish well.
That is so good. there is this sort of buzz about financial literacy and
Mm,
how it's not taught in school, and even well-meaning parents are oftentimes not realizing that they're not teaching their children effective financial management. So this is powerful, and this is really setting up a wealth mindset. And I love this kind of stuff because these are practical little things that we can do. So, like, even little things that I've done in the past. So Christmas gifts, teaching my stepdaughters, who are both adults,
mhm.
stocks, little things where you're just weaving it
Right.
in and empowering our children. That is a huge part of legacy.
I
And
agree.
it's kind of ironic that you see, some of these more high profile wealthy people, and they're sort of at odds with their adult children over all of this wealth that they've created for themselves. And it's like, well, you kind of dropped the ball, friend. Right?
Uh-huh. Absolutely. Absolutely. And then you couple that with, I mean, obviously you'll have listeners from all over, but I'm born and raised here in the South, and at least, the culture that I was raised with was one that, like, you don't talk about money. Like, it's rude. That's a hush hush subject. You don't ask those kinds of questions. You don't talk about it. You just power through, and fast forward several decades, and there either will or won't be some money there, and you figure out what to do about it then. And I think we do a disservice when we don't kind of, open the kimono a little bit and explain, hey, here's what we have, and here's how it's structured, and this is why we make the decisions we make. And one day you'll make these decisions too, but we want to kind of coach you along throughout this process.
So good. And there's probably so much more we could discuss on this subject, but I want to pivot a little bit because
Okay.
now I want to speak to you as the entrepreneur, because I know you're a serial entrepreneur. I know you've got that same challenge that we all have,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Mind won't stop, probably won't stop doing some type of business, some type of creating your
Yep.
legacy until you
Yep.
drop, right? So
Yeah.
I want to speak a little bit about your mindset journey as a business
Yeah.
owner, because a big part of this show is about let's get real, right? We're all human.
Sure.
Most of us did not, come out of the womb into pristine environments that conditioned us for success and confidence and wealth and happiness and all of that
Sure.
stuff. And I always think it's interesting, right? When we start to talk about these things and the mindset challenges that we all are working through on
Mhm.
our journey in our lives and in our businesses. And so I'm curious if you're willing to share with us one mindset obstacle that you've personally had to overcome in order to get to where you are today.
Yeah. No, I love that question, Alicia. So, um, in terms of obstacle, for me personally, it was the assumption that, or association with, the pursuit of wealth, and whether or not that was a reflection on my character. So again, grew up in the South. Couple that with, my dad was a minister. He was in the pulpit for 30 years. And so I had ingrained in me a natural aversion towards wealth accumulation, and even a wealth focus, I would say, right? There was almost sort of this aspiration one was supposed to have towards poverty, in a sense. And yet, at my core, I was always fascinated with money, always fascinated by accumulation and growth. And it took a while for me to reach a peace of mind about that, but that wasn't a flaw in my character. That wasn't an indication that I was weak or that I was materialistic, that it actually is okay and healthy to aspire to grow and build an empire, and not have that be a bad thing, but that the key was all things in moderation. The key was, not letting it get to your head. The key was not allowing it to crowd out other priorities that would be far more important in terms of relationships and core values and things of that nature. And so that was something I wrestled with a lot as an early entrepreneur. And I really only feel like probably in the last 15 years have I reached a good headspace on that.
One of the things that I've seen over the past decade that I've been working with business owners as a mindset coach is money mindset stuff. And
Mm,
there is a tremendous amount of shame that is
yes.
conditioned into us around money. You really are kind of screwed if you think about it, because we're we're wrong for wanting it, we're wrong
Mhm.
for having it, right? Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
For sure.
If you've got more than someone else, that's shameful. If you have less
Right.
than someone else, that's shameful. There's like
It's
no
so
sweet
true.
spot, really. So we
You're right.
have to really clean that stuff up and recognize that we are just following our path, right? We're
Mm,
doing what we're guided to in our hearts. And if
sure.
you're a good person and you are wealthy, you can do a lot of good
It's
with that.
true.
And you're not doing anybody any favors by having less than you need to have
Right.
a good quality of life. But that's all that crazy head stuff that we've got to work through because it holds people back.
You're so right. You're so right. And couple that with, the family of origin you grew up with is going to hand off a perspective and, in a sense, a legacy that is either scarcity driven or abundance driven. And then that creates all kinds of cycles, both healthy and unhealthy, that people have to balance with.
So you have a book.
I do.
Let's talk about that. Legends don't
Legends don't
retire.
retire, and neither should you.
So tell us a little bit about the book.
For sure. So for starters, I love the title because it throws people off, especially when they know my primary line of business. Again, I've got lots of irons and several fires, as most entrepreneurs tend to, but my primary focus is financial planning and wealth management. And so the natural assumption is, oh, well, Kyle, you must be the pro retirement guy. And I'm like, yeah, I really don't recommend it. I really don't think you should. And they go, whoa, why? That sounds unlike anything I've ever heard from anyone in the financial planning realm. Why would that possibly be? And it's like you and I were talking before the recording started. It's the fact that I just don't think we're wired for retirement. We're terrible at doing nothing. Everybody got a chance to test drive it back in lockdown, and the first 2 weeks were awesome. And then cabin fever sets in, and it just quickly becomes obvious that we are meant to be productive. We are meant to be making a difference. And I can tell you, I've had client after client retire, and within 2 months, they're miserable because their identity was tied up with their job. Their social circle was tied up with their job. And they, unfortunately, back to that nose to the grindstone problem that we talked about earlier, they haven't really invested in, well, who am I outside of the context of my work? Who am I as separate from my business or various businesses? What am I about? What's important to me? And I'll tell you, as an entrepreneur, one thing I've built into my financial planning business is every team member earns a 1 month paid sabbatical every 4 years. And that is designed specifically to get them out of the office and go experience life and find yourself and figure out what's important to you. And so Legends Don't Retire and Neither Should You isn't about you should die at your desk. And it is instead the stop romanticizing this concept of retirement where you're going to golf all day and play bridge forever. And instead figure out what is important to you, figure out what you want to be the definition of your legacy, and start building that now, even in little bitty ways like we were talking about earlier, Alicia. And then sure, there may be some opportunities down the road to make some big splashes, but go ahead and get active in building your legacy rather than just leaving it on the doorstep when you exit. And so it's really just kind of a playbook on unraveling some of the myths around retirement, putting some practical things in place about how you can actively build a legacy, and then forming a team around yourself so that you can be very intentional about the cultivation of that and the handoff of that to the next generation.
Awesome. Love it. So sounds like a good one. I assume they can get that on your website, Amazon.
Absolutely. And at Amazon stores near you. That is correct.
Okay. Where's your nearest cell phone or
That's
laptop?
exactly right. You got it. You got it.
All right, Kyle. How else can our listeners connect with you?
Oh, sure. So I'm at the Keller Chamber of Commerce meeting every month, so you can swing by there in Keller, Texas. But other than that, you know, we've got all the social media stuff, so Facebook and LinkedIn and those sorts of things. My kids understand how Instagram works. I do not. But we do the Facebook and the LinkedIn. Email, obviously, so Kyle@legendsdon'tretire.com. I will say that in addition to things like this, I'm always interested in public speaking opportunities. So looking for stages and places where there might be an audience that would be receptive to this type of messaging. Certainly open to that. And then we've got our standard, work that we do over at Bluegrass Legacy Group in terms of financial planning and wealth management, and always eager to have conversations with folks in that regard.
Excellent. I want to thank you so much, Kyle, for being with us today. It was a fun conversation about retirement.
Absolutely, Alicia. I enjoyed it.
Or unretirement.
Right, exactly.
And of course, I've got to thank all of our listeners. We are doing this for you. If you haven't already subscribed, make sure you do so. And until next time, we will see you in the next episode.